The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everyone. This is Bob Jakowski, and it's a pleasure to have you join us for today's webinar. Today, we're going to talk about a strategic topic that's near and dear to most CEOs, COOs, and most business owners, and really to anybody that is trying to build a great company. And that is, how do you dominate and win your target markets? As many of you read coming into today's webinar, a lot of companies today have what I call a competing strategy. It means that they compete in certain markets or certain verticals or industries to win business every year. And so they think about how do we grow revenue by, let's say, 10%, 20%, or 30% year over year. And that's really the goal. And that's really good to have those intentional goals. The question in many cases is your intention to get 30% growth year over year? Or is your intention to do that and to win your target market? So what I look at in many cases when we sit down and talk to like a chief executive is really looking at their strategy. And it does begin with strategy. So the intentional strategy is to grow revenue. The intentional strategy may be also to win your market. So winning the market is something we're going to talk about today. And so we're going to talk about 8 ways that you can actually dominate and win your target markets. Now, if you put in a winning strategy to go win your market, and that's really your key, the question is, what does that get you? So, what comes out of that accomplishment of winning your target market? Well, the first thing is velocity. When everybody starts realizing that you're the leader and you're winning the market, they make decisions much quicker, and you become the default solution for the service or the solution that you offer today. The second benefit that it attributes to you when you are winning your market is that you're eliminating competition, because you now become the standard which all others are judged against. The third one, I think, is efficiency. So everybody starts getting a good understanding of who you are, what you can do, and how you're meeting the needs of their industry, their type of company. And the fourth is how you become more valuable. So for a lot of companies and a lot of CEOs and business owners, the key is, how do you increase the value of your company? Well, one way you increase the value of your company is by winning markets. When you win markets, that gives you competitive immunity and makes you more valuable in terms of investors, in terms of partners, and in terms of employees. So, and your customers want to go with a winning company. Your customers want to be part of a winning team. So throughout today's webinar, I just want to let everybody know that we're going to make this interactive. If you have questions, please post the questions. We want to get your questions answered. If not during the webinar, in our Q&A session, we'll make sure we address the questions that you have after today. In addition, please go ahead and participate in our polls, because your polls help us drive what we spend time on today. And these are really strategic discussions. These are on best practices. These are about giving you the information, the knowledge, the wisdom to really go win your target markets, to be a leader in the space that you're at, and to make the most of your career. So that's really what we're all about at On Demand Advisors. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us for today. We'd like to start off with a poll, if we could, and get your input. So when you think about winning your target markets, the question, I guess, is, what's the major challenges or top challenge you would say to go in and win the market? And let me go ahead and launch the poll and see if you can help us give us your opinion. One challenge you may have is, you may say, hey, we've got too many competitors in this market, so it's very difficult for us to go win. A second one is that you can't reach the entire market. So if you can't reach the entire market, then you can't engage and win the entire market. A third one is that you need to build a bigger demand generation engine. So whatever you have today is insufficient to go out there and win the market. A fourth, maybe you need more of a compelling value proposition or value propositions that would be more strategic in terms of what your audience wants. Or the fifth one is you need a partner to reach where you cannot reach today in terms of coverage or partners. So all these are interesting challenges or headwinds that you could experience today. But if you'd be kind enough to just drop in and participate in the poll, that would be excellent. Really appreciate that. And then we'll address these issues. So we'll spend more time on the ones that are important to you, and less time on the other topics. Okay, good. So we're getting a good stratification here. So let me go ahead and give it a couple more seconds as far as collecting responses. Thank you very much for participating. That's really good. Okay, let me share what we have here. So 13% stated that your biggest challenge is reaching your entire audience. The biggest of all of these, though, is the third one, which is we need a bigger demand generation engine to actually go out and create the demand for your company. We also have another 13% where you need more compelling value propositions. And finally, 25% of you stated that the key is really getting partners so that you can reach your entire market. So thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. And that's what we'll spend our time on today. Okay, let's go ahead if we could, and let's proceed forward. A little bit about our background. We're all about revenue growth. We're all about helping you achieve your revenue growth goals. So a lot of companies out there that can basically do this in parts. They are lead generation companies. They may provide different services like sales consulting and so forth. We actually think about this a little bit more holistically. The way we think about this, and this is something we've created, which is helping you put in a revenue acceleration operating system. That's really what we think about this. This is a model on how you operate. So revenue growth and achieving this type of growth we're talking about is something that you have to implement. It is a connected process that spans marketing, sales, and client support and customer services, but it's something that really needs to be optimized. So what we found, at least through our journey in terms of operating successful B2B companies, both Craig and myself as CEO and CMO in Silicon Valley, and today working with hundreds of business owners and executives to do the same, we found there's really kind of three things that are kind of important. One is we've got to be able to help you architect for your success. That means it's strategy. It means about optimizing your business model. The second thing is what you see here is engineering predictable revenue growth. So we've really figured out how to crack the code here and do this. And how do you actually engineer revenue growth and do it in a very predictable, capital efficient way? And the third thing is execute with velocity. So you don't want to just do things, you want to do them quickly. So the most efficient way to take the buyer through the buying process is really going to be important as you think about your assets and think about your company. So that's a little bit about On-Demand Advisors, and we hope we get a chance to partner with everybody that's attending our webinar today. Let's talk about the 8 strategic levers to dominate and win your target markets. And this is really fascinating when you start thinking about this. So we're going to walk you through all 8 of these in today's webinar. But you may choose to do 1 or 2 of these things. You may choose to do all 8. But they all are going to help you contribute to you winning your target market. And when you do win your target markets, as I've experienced many times in my career, it's just a tremendous degree of satisfaction and reward that you receive when you get to this point. So let's talk about the first thing, which is validating your messaging and positioning with decision makers. And one question I'd ask for all of you to think about today is how do you know your messaging and positioning is working for you? And that's really kind of the key is we all have messaging, we all have positioning. The question is, have we done the second thing, which is, are we validating that with our target decision makers? And so there are a number of ways to do validation. One is most recent sales. So if you just close a strategic customer, then you may find that you're going to extract a lot of information from that experience. Another thing that companies typically do is they put together customer focus groups to get some input from their customers, especially as it pertains to the product or service roadmap. A third area, and this is one that we'll talk about, which is the lead into the answer to this, is to conduct a statistically relevant survey. So we found that there's nothing more important for you to do in running a company than actually go out there and figure out what's in the head of your decision makers that you're selling to. Figure out what's important to them, what pains and business challenges are you solving, and what's the value propositions that you want to test, and then what do they want from you? What would be of interest to them? What type of knowledge? What type of webinars? What type, like we're doing today? What type of ebooks, information? What type of videos? What type of information would be helpful for them as they're going through their education and their evaluation, and finally their implementation of your service, of your solution? So these surveys that we found, and we've done actually hundreds of these, really are good because they help you focus in on what's important to your buyer so you don't waste energy in other areas. So that's the first thing you can do to really go after and win your market, is making sure you fully understand what's important to the decision makers in your target audience. Once you do that, it helps you refine and really rethink your messaging strategy, your positioning that you have, and then what you're creating that's going to help your buyer through the buyer's journey that we'll talk about later. So that's number one. Number two is reaching your target audience. So I've had the good fortune to conduct revenue acceleration workshops all over North America. And what I found is really interesting is that many of the executives that I've pulled in these workshops, I've asked one question, and that is, what percentage of your target audience are you reaching today? And more often than not, it's somewhere less than 10%. There's an occasional executive that is in a very niche or well-defined vertical where they may be reaching 50% of that audience. But it's interesting to me that most people are not reaching their entire audience. So one of the things I would say today for all of you is, if you want to win your market, you've got to reach your target market. And to do that means you've got to think about, how do you actually build a database that encompasses your entire market. So we've been in this for many years at On Demand Advisors and then running companies. And what I realized is that most companies need to have a reach strategy. A reach strategy says, perhaps not today, but over time, we're going to reach 100% of our decision makers. And the reason it's important is because you don't know what 5 or 10% of those decision makers in that market are going to invest in your service or solution this year. But you do know that if you don't reach them, they can't buy from you. So two of the databases that we work with in many cases is ZoomInfo and Apollo.io. Both of them are great databases. There are going to be occasions, though, where neither one of these database companies offers the database you're looking for. So let me give you an example. One of our customers that we have sells into the franchise industry. So the franchise industry is very, very focused on having corporate and many franchise businesses underneath corporate. And so what we realized is that we couldn't find the companies with the franchises and all the key titles and personas we were looking for through any database. So what we did, and we've been doing this for now 15 years, is our team went out and built the database for the customer. So now going forward, they're able to reach 100% of their target market in the franchise industry. That really gives them an opportunity to not only reach and engage, but to educate every one of those executives, every one of those operational managers about what they can do for them, what the value is, and how they can engage. So that would be the second area that I would talk about, which is having a reach strategy that's going to get you to 100% of your target market. The third area that we look at when you're going to win your target market is realize that it's not one size fits all. So if you're selling a solution today or a service and you're basically treating all your buyers the same way, you may find that it's inadequate. Some buyers are more sophisticated than others. Some buyers are more competent in terms of how to use your service or your solution than others. Some buyers are really looking for you to do more of the heavy lifting than them. So one of the things that we always like to do is define what's the whole solution. In many cases, I find many of you may be providing part of a solution, not the whole solution. So for instance, you may offer a system that does talent management, helps companies in the talent management area. And that is really going to tap into the HR system. But it also is going to integrate with other solutions or other systems that that company uses. It's going to have to work with recruiting agencies or recruiting software and so forth. So the whole solution is all of that in terms of what you can help your client or customer really interact on. So one of the things that we look at when we think about this type of strategy is, in many of you may seen this, Jeffrey Moore and a number of other great thought leaders came up with this some time ago, and they talked about the adoption curve. And regardless of the service or the solution or the platform that you provide today, you'll see that there is an adoption curve that you have for every one of those. If you come out with a new service or solution, or you acquire a company, you're going to find that there is an adoption curve. And so the key here is to segment your audience so that you can actually have the right go-to-market strategy for each of the audiences. So for instance, for your early innovators that are coming aboard on your platform or service, they just may need the platform and service. They may already have the wherewithal to actually add what they need to it and get from here to there. More often than not, though, the early majority and the late majority are looking for you to actually help them implement that process, that business process that you're helping them with, that service or solution, and help them understand what's the best way to use it and reap benefit from it. Now, on the back end, there are going to be some folks that say, you could do all the training and education in the world, but they're still not going to get it. And so in that case, you may want to offer just a service. Let's do it for them instead of having to do it for themselves. If it's a platform or a solution, sell it as a service, position it as a service. So platform as a service or SaaS, software as a service, so that you're providing the service to them, because in many cases, all they really want is the outcomes. So many of your customers aren't really looking at wanting to embrace our own technology. What they're looking for is the value that comes out of that service or outcome. So this is one way to go win your target audience, is to make sure you segment the audience correctly and provide the bundling and solutions in the right venue that you see see so often with companies that are offering what we call progressive bundling solutions. Okay, let's move on to the fourth one. The fourth one is something that we've been doing on a proprietary basis for quite a few years, and that is helping your company implement your revenue acceleration engine. Now, it's interesting when you think about this. Many of the executives that we talk to and engage with, they're tired of trying out lead generation companies that don't deliver. So everybody and their brother wants to do appointment setting or lead generation or some type of program, an SEO program or some type of LinkedIn program. And those are all great tactical programs. But what we figured out is what you really want is you want to think through the ingredients of putting in this engine so that you can scale. So if you want to use their program, that's great. Include that in the bundle, but put in an engine that's going to give you predictable, scalable revenue growth. So that's what we look at, is this engine. It needs to be predictable. It needs to be intentional. So what we found is every customer is not a great customer. Some customers that come in through inbound traffic, you could sell them, you can onboard them, but they won't be great customers because they're not a good fit for you. Instead, what you want to do is you want to intentionally find the best customers or clients for you for your service, and you want to find them, engage them, and make sure you bring them aboard. And then the third thing is this engine needs to be capital efficient. You don't want to spend a lot of time experimenting and trying out different things only to find out that you went to Las Vegas and gave your money to the house. Instead, what you want to do basically is say, what's the most capital efficient way for me to go reach, engage, and win this market? So in another week or so, Craig, my partner, Craig Remy, um, just tremendous leader in terms of being a serial chief marketing officer and doing branding for some major brands from San Francisco agencies, like with Google, Levi Strauss, Disney, and so forth. He's going to walk you through how to implement the revenue acceleration engine that we talk about so often. And as you can imagine, with any engine, there are different components that have to go into the engine for it to function. So what he's going to do is he's going to be operating a series to really walk through what goes into this engine that you want to put in place, and then how do you scale this. By the way, when you put this engine in place, it's something you're going to want to do for the rest of your life, is to own it, to operate it, to scale it. And as you can see, there are a number of components that we're going to walk through with you. Not today, because this is really focused on the key topic, which is how do you win your target markets and dominate them. But this is one of the most important things that you can do at any company, is put this engine in place. Let's talk about number 5. Number 5, or the fifth thing that you could do to actually go win and dominate your markets, is to create lighthouse accounts. So the first question is, who are your best customers today? And what makes them your best customer? So is it the people that are involved because you're working with the executives and they get you and they get what you can do for them? Is it because of the type of company that they are? Are they a company that embraces change, knows how to implement it, and has institutionalized your service across the entire company? Is it somebody who's driving ROI? In other words, are they really driving return on investment, return on assets when they work with you? Is it somebody who wants to be your evangelist, your champion? All of these are great assets that you look at when you think about creating a lighthouse account. So one of the things that we look at is, what would you need to do if you wanted to create that lighthouse or marquee account? And then how do you showcase that account and that person and the possibilities of the service today? I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. At one of the companies that I was the chief revenue officer at earlier in my career, a company called Rightworks, we provided e-procurement solutions, and we also provided a platform. So that was basically a marketplace platform for buying and selling goods and services. And one of our early customers was Wells Fargo Bank. And together, working with a gentleman by the name named Matt Graves, not only did we implement our solution for managing all of the spend across Wells Fargo Bank, which is 50,000 employees, but we also put in a marketplace for Matt so that he could pass along the Wells Fargo discount to all of their customers, many of them SMBs who didn't have buying power. Once we did that with Wells Fargo Bank, which by the way was an unusual implementation of the platform with a bank, what we found is that every other bank in North America wanted to see how they could do the same thing. So there's an example of a lighthouse account. Not only did we do something truly unique and unusual, but we also were doing what we call the in and out model. We were saving cost on one side of the house. On the other side of the house, we were helping them create revenue and adding value-added solutions to their marketplace. And the other thing is, since they were the number one provider of SBA loans at the time, what we found is that this was a great way to provide the small businesses with a loan, but then also provide them with the buying power that they could go out and use that investment or that money to go out and provide that marketplace for them. So that's a great example of creating a Lighthouse account. Let's talk about number 6. Number 6 is recruiting the right partners for coverage. So if you look at your partnerships that you have today, and many of you do have partnerships in place today, are they really opportunistic? Are they coming to you, or are you going to them? One of our clients recently said, we've got this company in the UK that would like to represent our platform across Europe. And so they were coming to that company to engage to see if they could represent that partnership. So that's not unusual. That happens pretty often. So that's where somebody's coming to you as opposed to you reaching out to them. Another situation is many people that have partnerships today, I find there's a reoccurring theme. And that recurring theme is they're typically disappointed with the partner's ability to drive revenue contribution and meet your expectations. So the question we've always looked at is there a better way to recruit partners that you want? Is there a better way to invest in the right partnerships? And realize that every partner that you sign up is going to get a piece of your company. They're going to require time from your engineering team or your services team. They're going to require time from your management team to manage the relationship. And so it's got to be the right partners. If it's not, then they're going to suck up a lot of the management time and the time of your functional group. So we think that there is the right way to do this, and we've been perfecting this over many years. And the right way we look at doing that is to move from an opportunistic to what we call a proactive relationship with your partners. So one of the things that we do when we work on finding the right partners is to, first of all, create the profile. Who is the right partner for you today? There's an ecosystem around you today. In every market that you go into, in every area, there's already an ecosystem there. The question is, who would be the right partners in that ecosystem? Then the second thing is, have you mapped that ecosystem to understand all of the different partners? And then have you looked at that ecosystem relative to who would you want to work with based upon your partner profile? That's something that we do for our clients. Again, it's another proprietary service that we do for our clients to really help figure out who they should go after and how do they do this. Now, when we've done this, for instance, with one of our customers, Gather Digital, not only did it help them understand in the event management space who they should partner with, but it also helped them understand who was missing what they had, so it became a strategic hole in their solution set. One of those companies, in fact, the first one that we introduced them to, actually in the end, over time, acquired the company, and because they realized that they didn't have a mobile event management strategy that they could execute. And that became really important. So this is really one of the most important things. Another thing I'd share with you is when I was the CEO at Intact, software as a service financial application software company, half of our revenue came through partners. So we had 300 different partners that would take our solution to market. 150 CPA firms, and the other what I would call market makers. What was great about that is we knew that through our direct sales efforts, we couldn't reach the entire market, but we could with partners. So partners really helped us get into different geographies, in different verticals, different markets that we actually didn't have a direct presence in. And so we were able to fully leverage that ecosystem, and that would be what I'm talking about, number 6 here today. Let's talk about number 7. Number 7 is outfoxing your competitors. Well, why is this important in terms of winning your market? Well, your market is a pie. And basically, when you have a lot of competition, you've got other people that are splitting up your pie. So you get a smaller piece of the pie than they do. So consequently, that's the challenge. And by the way, one of the biggest competitors that every company has is do nothing. In fact, if you listed all of your competitors, I would imagine that do nothing, in other words, you go through the entire engagement process with your client or customer or buyer, and they do nothing after you go through that process, I would imagine that would be your biggest competitor. That's pretty typical. Now, if that's the case, the question is, how do you avert that? So outfoxing your competitors is really kind of important. So the first thing is defining the requirements with your champion. So really helping your champion, and there's always a champion, somebody that has to sponsor you in that sale. There's always a champion that needs to be educated and worked with through the process. So one of the things that I've always thought was fun is to help them create requirements for the service or solution that they need that competitors don't qualify to meet. Another thing to do is really to equip your sales organization with the knowledge and what we call competitive battle cards. That's something that Gartner Group came up with as far as a term. But the competitive battle card, in essence, is something that we would typically create for one of our clients. And that is, how is your SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, how is that going to win against your competitor's SWOT? If you can start doing that and equipping your champions and your sales organization with that type of scorecard, you're going to figure out how to do that. So another thing that I find that's really interesting is a lot of companies don't act as a leader in their markets. They act as a participant. One of the companies that I thought was really interesting that I would compete against at one time is a company called Siebel Systems in the CRM space. And Tom Siebel, really kind of a genius in terms of branding and marketing. And what I found with Tom is I remember when I knew he had 30 customers. Many of those customers were large customers with systems integrators. And he would be advertising that he was the leader in CRM at the time. And I knew that he wasn't. However, he branded and advertised and promoted his company as if he was the leader. So acting like the leader is a great way to start off thinking about how customers and prospects should be thinking about your company. Okay, that's good. So let's move on to the next area. The next area, number 8, is leveraging the endorsement from giants and influencers. So if you think about this area of leveraging influencers and giants, one of the keys you need to think about is how do you identify the industry leaders, the influencers, the allies in your space today? Sometimes you may be able to do that by going to conferences and seeing who's speaking at those conferences. Sometimes you may already know. Sometimes it may be analysts that are following your space. It may be marquee lighthouse accounts that we talked about. Whereas if Wells Fargo Bank becomes a customer, everybody wants to become a customer. And so when you think about this, very few companies that I see out there today make this part of their go-to-market strategy. We actually, this is one of our clients. One of our clients provided educational curriculum, much like you would find with like a Coursera today. And they were very innovative in terms of some of the courses that they were creating. Some of the courses were focused around Internet of Things, AI, smart cars, smart cities, and so forth. And so what we did is we went out and we figured out who were the thought leaders, who were the cutting edge people that were developing smart cars, who were the cutting edge people that were inventing and implementing smart cities, who were the people that were leaders in AI and the application of use cases with AI. And so we recruited them to become speakers, to become collaborators with this company. And it was amazing. It was not unusual for us to do a webinar on a topic and have 500 to 1,000 people actually attend that webinar because the market was thirsting for knowledge. The market wanted to know what was happening in this new space. And so we were able to connect their leadership around educational programs to thought leaders and influencers in the market. So let's just go ahead and recap this. If you want to dominate and win your target market, there are 8 things that we recommend to you. First of all is validating your messaging. Again, we have a proprietary approach that we've created around how to conduct these buyer intelligence surveys. and really make sure that it sticks with decision makers. Because once you do that, you know how to talk to the market. The second area we talked about is reaching 100% of your target audience. It's important to have a reach strategy. It's important to reach the audience, if not now, over time. And so have a reach strategy that gets you over to that point. The third area that we talked about is segmenting your audience with the right go-to-market strategy. Some people, for instance, let's say if you have a software solution, some people want the software solution. Some people want the software solution and implementation services. Some people want that plus best practices. But some people don't want the software solution at all. They just want the service and the outcomes. So really understanding what's the right go-to-market strategy for each of your segments. The fourth is implementing your revenue acceleration engine. You want to have an engine and multiple engines in your organization so that you actually can grow and scale into each of these markets. So for instance, when we worked with AvidXchange, we would help them put in a revenue acceleration engine for their main vertical that they were in, which is in the property management space. And we were help them to go win that market. But then they realized that they had a number of other customers that they had gotten through serendipity or word of mouth or whatever. And they didn't really know if just because they had Regions Bank as a customer, if that was indicative of going to win the financial services market for their solution. So we conducted a buyer intelligence survey, and then we helped put the revenue acceleration engine in for the financial services market to help them go win that market too. And so we did that over 6 markets, and it was very successful. The fifth area we talked about winning and dominating your market is you got to have lighthouse accounts. Now, even if you're selling to the small business markets, you can still have leaders in that space, people that are your catalyst, your evangelist, your champion. The sixth area we talked about is covering the globe with the right partners. So if you can't reach all of the areas, all of the opportunities yourself, find some partnerships and the right ones to reach that market. Number 7, we talked about outfoxing your competitors. And number 8, we talked about leveraging the endorsement from giants and influencers in the market. So these are really 8 just tremendous levers that you can apply today to start figuring out how you're going to win and dominate your markets that you serve and work with today. So with that, let's start with one more takeaway question, if we could, and ask everybody if they could participate in this. So when you think about today's content, you think about what we just discovered or shared with you. The question is what is your major takeaway from today's webinar? Is it that you really want to determine how to apply some of these best practices and be able to do that? Is it that you're looking at implementing a revenue acceleration engine, as we talked about with a number of clients? Is it that you want to implement a reach strategy to engage 100% of your target audience? Is it that you want to make your offers and business justification more specific in terms of getting the outcomes you're looking for? Or is it that you want to recruit partners to cover your target markets? You know, one of the things I find most interesting is we talked about competition. And a lot of times why I find why business doesn't close for many companies is because they didn't create the business justification that showed the outcomes and ROI that was going to be achieved with their service or solution. When that happens, the prospect will take you through the entire sales cycle, but nothing closes because they haven't been able to justify the investment. So that became very, very interesting in terms of seeing that happen over and over again. So I'll leave the survey on here for just a little bit longer, and then let's go ahead and we'll show the results. Or I'll just talk to the results. It's interesting. We have the results between the first one basically is, let's go ahead and do this. I'll close this and share. So 38% of you stated that you really want to determine how to apply these best practices to your company today. Any one of them is really material, really important. All 8 of them is dynamite. It really is dynamite. Now, there are two that were tied for second, which is implementing a revenue acceleration engine and making your offers and business justification more compelling. And then the last one is implementing a reach strategy so that you can engage 100% of your audience. So that's fantastic. Fantastic to get that type of feedback. What we'd like to do right now is let's go ahead and let's move on to Q&A, and let's see what questions that you have. So if you'd be kind enough, go ahead and post your questions that you have, as I said earlier, and let's see how many questions we can help you address today. So this one is from George, and George says, you mentioned 8. Is there one we should start with? Good question. To start with, one of the most interesting things, and that's why I put it at number 1, is I think a good place to start is validating your messaging and positioning with decision makers. It's interesting. We work with companies that have been in markets for 1 year and companies that have been in the same markets for 30 years. Both companies need to really do a buyer intelligence survey to understand their buyer. If you're new to a market or you're new to launching your company, you don't want to waste a lot of time trying different things out that don't work, which is what most people do, by the way. Now, if you've been in the market for a long time, it's great to do a buyer intelligence survey every couple years because your buyer changes. What you think you know about your buyer may not be true today as it was 3 years ago. So that's probably the number 1 place I would start. So George, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. Next one is from Marguerite. Marguerite says, how do you assess a customer versus a Lighthouse account? It's a good question. I think a good way to look at it is anybody could be your customer, Marguerite. But to think about a Lighthouse account, it's typically a company or organization that is everybody it looks to as a leader in their industry or space. So Wells Fargo Bank was an easy Lighthouse account that we worked with because they are a true leader in banking and the financial services sector. So most companies, regional banks, international banks, mom and pops, whoever, most of them were going to look to Wells Fargo Bank and what they did as being industry leaders. Another example is I got the good fortune to work with a company called Computer Sciences Corporation. And Computer Sciences Corporation is one of the major systems integrators out there. And so they decided to, at that time, take our platform and to use it internally for all of their spend and work that they did across the company. But they also used the platform to serve all their needs that they did for strategic procurement for their customers. So once they did that, you can imagine that it really proved out the platform and the usability for systems integrators. So good question. And thank you for that question. I appreciate that. Okay, let's move on to another question here. This one is from Wendy. Wendy says, what does win mean to you? So we talk about winning your market. And sometimes people may think, well, if I win my market, I've got 100% penetration. Everybody becomes my customer. That's not really true. The chances of you winning 100% of your market is pretty low. I mean, even Apple with their smartphone isn't going to win 100% of their market against Android. So there's always going to be competition out there. There's always going to be people that maybe don't want to buy that solution. But when we say winning your market, it means reaching everybody in your market. It means engaging everybody in your market. It means giving them an opportunity to engage with you through compelling offers and engagement and knowledge. But it also means being in a position where in any given year, you feel comfortable, you've done everything you can to go win, engage that market that you have out there today. So good question. So we've got time perhaps just for one more question. So let me look at this question over here. And this one is from Jeremy. Jeremy says, how do we build partnerships? That's a good question. It's a longer conversation, Jeremy. The one thing I would say that we do that I think is rather proprietary in terms of what most companies do is we build a partner scorecard. So the first thing is building a scorecard that says what makes for an attractive partner for you. Is it the distribution ability that they have, number of salespeople that they can have take your service or solution to market? Is it their background in terms of being open to do that, to take other people's solution or service to market? Is it that they are in places where you're not today? So the first thing I would say, the first place to get started as far as building partnerships is to create a scorecard, because then that'll put you on the pathway to understand the best fit for the partnerships that you're thinking about. So great questions, and thank you everybody for posting those questions for today. So let's talk about next steps that would be meaningful for you to take from today's webinar. One thing we could do is set up a conversation, and by the way, our conversations are free of charge, and so we're not charging you for our expertise just like today's webinar. To talk about how do you want to think about dominating and winning your target markets. And so that would be a good next step. So how do we apply this to your company? The second thing I would suggest is join us on September 21st and let Craig walk you through one of the most important things we talked about on that checklist of 8 items about how to implement your revenue acceleration system. So if you go to our website, On Demand Advisors, you just go over to the events tab, you'll find that you can just go in there and you can register for the webinar coming up here today. So you're always welcome to reach out to Craig or I directly. We've got many team members at On Demand Advisors in the different areas of strategy, marketing, sales enablement, and business development. But we're here to actually help you think through strategically where it makes sense to grow your company, to be successful, and to most importantly, to go win and dominate your target markets. So on behalf of our organization, Craig and myself, and our entire On Demand Advisors team, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today for this informative webinar. We hope you walked away with 8 tremendous tips and best practices that will help you figure out how to win and dominate your target markets. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.